the car looked like absolute junk. It looked like someone with a warped sense of humor from a junkyard had taken this vehicle and dropped it in front of the Exxon station I worked at in high school. Why would anyone bring that piece of junk here? How did they get it here? How did it get here without being towed was what was on my mind as I was checking in. It looked like an automotive crime against humanity. It sat there in its putrid looking paint. I mean, obviously it had been many colors over its very long life, and all of those many colors of cheap paint jobs had blended by this point into one of the most unique colors I had ever seen. It was a color blend reminiscent of mustard, but that doesn't quite capture it. It wasn't ordinary mustard. It looked like mustard with anemia. If you can imagine that, you medical people, mustard with anemia. It was like a pale, anemic mustard color. A pale color that looked like it needed a vitamin B shot, or a shot of iron, or just a B shot put out of its misery. It was a sick-looking old-time Nova from the mid-60s, with all the aerodynamics of a square box covered in mustard, anemic mustard. Working at the Exxon station, I had seen all kinds of cars during my time. I mean, I've seen from beautiful luxury cars. I mean, I had seen some fast sports cars, rich cars, poor cars, but I had never seen a car quite like that. A broken down old Nova that had looked like it'd run into a mustard factory. All I could do was hope that it wouldn't be in front of our station. I mean, I literally thought that when I walked in. This shows you what a teenager guy is thinking. I walk in, I think, I hope this is out of here soon. I mean, this is an eyesore. I clocked into work, and my friend David, who was the master mechanic's son, a teenage master mechanic in his own right, he was our small Texas town's version of the blonde Dukes of Hazzard guy. He looked at me, and I said to him, what's the Nova in here for? He said, just minor adjustments to the carburetor. I literally laughed at David. I said, minor? How could you do anything minor to that car? Just then his dad, my boss, Tom, walked in, and he said, Ron, I want you to deliver this Nova to the parts store on the other side of town. I mean, it was a job I didn't want. Usually I'd want to drive to get away from work, but no, I didn't even want to get in this car. And I thought, no, I have to ride this thing right down Main Street of our small Texas town this summer afternoon. And I mean, what if girls from my high school see me, or worse, we were in a college town. What if college women see me in this car? I mean, you could ruin a reputation quick in a small town. I thought, what if it scares small children? What if it hurts people with heart conditions? But I didn't have any choice. Tom told me, take it down there, and that's what I did. I took the keys off the hook. I went out. The windows were rolled down, for that was the air conditioning of that car in Texas, if you can imagine. I got into it. The upholstery was miserable. I'm thinking, this is going to stick to me when I get out. And as I'm ready to start the car, David, Mr. Dukes of Hazzard, comes up to me. He looks in the window and he says, Ron, don't give it too much gas. It's Paul's car. And he walked away. And as he's walking away, I'm thinking, don't give it too much gas. I said, didn't we just adjust the carburetor? What's it going to do, flood? Blow up? And he wouldn't answer me. He just walked on into the shop. And as he did, I thought, this is Paul's car. Why would Paul have a car like this? I mean, Paul was the main guy at an auto parts store. Paul had grown up his whole life working with cars. Paul had every availability to have, and he's got this piece of junk. It was with that thought that I pushed the clutch in and I turned the key. And when I did, it was so loud. I thought, it sounded like a huge jet without any kind of muffler system. I thought to myself, not only is it ugly, it's loud. It's so loud that everyone in town's going to hear the noise and look to see who's coming, and they're going to see Ron in the mustard mobile, anemic mustard. With that thought, I popped the clutch, and I really didn't listen to David. I gave it the gas. And when I did, whoa, I literally almost lost the thing in the first moments. It was that powerful. I mean, suddenly I'm not in the mustard mobile. I am in a mustard blur. I mean, I am shifting and I am laying rubber down in different gears going down. I am laying a scratch almost the length of that Main Street. It was something, man. I had been in fast cars before, but nothing like this. I mean, I was back into, pushed back into the rotting upholstery with this thing. I'm not in the mustard mobile, I'm in the mustard blur. Before you know it, doesn't take long to get out of town that way. I'm at the other end of town. I pull into the parts store. I get out, I shut it off, I get out. I kind of gather myself a little because really, I couldn't tell you how shocked I was. And then I went on into the shop and there he was, Paul, on the other side of the counter. And can you imagine in those days, no computers. He's looking, those parts stores, they had these big, thick books. Some of you remember this? Big, thick books. And he was like the librarian of auto parts. And he's there looking at stuff, but I could tell he looked, how I was thinking, okay, I got to talk to him. He looks up, he says, "Oh, hey, Ron, is it done?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "How's it running?" I said, "Not bad." He said, "Good, come on, let's go back. I'll take you back to the station." We went out, I got into the passenger side, and Paul got into the driver's side. He got in, and before he turned the car on, and he looked over at me, and he gave me a devious smile. And when he did, this guy, it's his car, he knows it. He gave it everything. He lifted it, and then we were gone. If I had been a lip reader, I could have read my own lips as they went back to the back seat of the car, making their way past me. I mean, he took me there. It was a ride. Got to the Exxon station, slams on the brakes. I get out, he's gone. I walked into the station, and David, with his little devious face of his, he looks, he says, "So, how'd it run?" And I said, "Not bad." He said, "Not bad, huh?" He had hot rods of himself. He says, "It's the fastest car in the county." Paul made a lot of money with that car. I guess, people who drag and stuff, they call these sleeper cars. They look ugly, but everything is under the hood and under the chassis. I mean, it's chrome, it's everything. It's the top of the line, everything in there. He made a lot of money with that car, usually up in Fort Worth or Dallas. He'd be a green light or a red light there waiting, and someone would come with their fancy car, their Porsche or whatever, and they'd laugh at him because it was so loud. And he'd say, "Oh yeah, how much?" 100 back then, 100 on green. And then Paul would leave them in his anemic dust. I know that he was doing some illegal drag racing with the thing. A few weeks later, I went back to the parts store to get stuff for us. And I remember I looked over a counter at him, and he looked a little disgusted. So I said, "Hey, Paul, what's wrong?" He said, "Ah, man, this weekend I messed up some parts in the front end of my car." I asked him how he did it. He said, "Well, I was popping wheelies and riding wheelies, and I came down a little too fast on the last one." I don't think Paul went to church. Kind of know those things in a small town. But he and his mustard-mobile remind me of an important spiritual lesson. It's not the outside that matters. It's what's under the hood that counts. Maybe part of the reason the journey has taken us so long is because we spent more time focusing on and worrying about the externals and how we look on the outside, how other people look on the outside, checking out how polished that hood ornament is. But that kind of focus leaves Christians and congregations looking more like pretty shells than living bodies. The early church was a church that walked on water. What it lacked in hood ornaments, it more than made up with for what was under the hood. I mean, its buildings may have been ugly as could be. Maybe the paint jobs altogether blended into an anemic mustard, but there was nothing anemic about the impact of the first church, the impact on the world. It may have lacked a lot, that first church, but it didn't lack for power. The question today, Christian, is what's under the hood? How are you traveling? Are you rowing against the tide and trying to keep your head above water? What's under the hood, church? Are we rowing hard against the gale force winds of this world, the gale force winds and the dark storm of this age? Are we struggling just trying to stay afloat? I'm wondering, are we ready to try something different, a different approach? Do we want to walk with Jesus so much that we are willing to leave the safety or seeming safety of a sinking boat to stand in faith? Are we willing to step out of the boat? I ask that because, not every disciple walked on water. You know how many did, don't you? Just one. I think the percentages of churches that walk on water are probably less than 1 in 12. In Jesus' day, only one disciple asked to come to him on the water. The others didn't ask. I don't think they even thought to ask. I'm wondering, Christian, are we ready to be different than maybe some who sit around us? What is holding us back? Is it that we're far from perfect? Well, if you know anything about Peter, you know that's no excuse. Or is it really fear that we might fall or we might fail? Is it really lack of faith? Is it doubt? Listen, disciple. Listen to Jesus more than your doubts. Look, church. Look to Jesus more than the storm. Let your hunger to be close to Christ be greater than your fear. I want you to think about it. What is God trying to teach us, his children, by having this story in the Bible? Why did he put it here for us? What lessons is it that God would have us learn? To have us become a part within us and change us with the power of God. What light does God want to shine into our darkness? Could it be that Jesus wants us to know that those disciples had spent 8 hours with sails and rowing just to get across the Sea of Galilee, which is a lake? They had spent 8 of those hours going across the lake. They were only halfway there. Jesus had spent the same 8 hours on a mountaintop in prayer, and he's further ahead of them, and he doesn't even have a boat. Did he want them to learn the lesson that they obviously hadn't learned earlier in the day? That God can do more with the blessing of a little boy's lunch than 12 full-grown disciples trying to come up with an answer with their resources and their intellect, and there were leftovers. Did God want the disciples to learn that they were safe not by the size of their boat, but by the size of their God? Did he want them to know that there is no storm too dark, that he can't see us, that there's no wind howling so loud that he cannot hear the cries of his children, that there's no storm rough enough, loud enough to keep him from hearing and seeing? 3.5 miles. 8 hours later, halfway there. They had to be exhausted. I want you to think about, there are disciple fishermen that had lived their life on that sea. They had spent their nights out on the water because that's when they usually fished. They knew all about this, and they are halfway there, and this is a storm to be reckoned with. And there, in the midst of the storm, Simon Peter, he makes a request as crazy and wild as the sea. Permission to step overboard, Captain. How's that for radical discipleship? Loving John didn't ask. And doubting Thomas, I think he was probably bailing for all he was worth. And I think that, Judas probably was holding on to an oar with that white-knuckled control he was so well known for. And Peter, he sees Jesus. And he has this heart that longs to be with him. He sees him out on the water, and he knows immediately that he wants to get closer to him. And he says, Lord, if it's you, bid me to come. And Jesus looks at Peter and he says, you asked, now come. And don't miss this, because this is really key. I love this. In that moment, after the request, and Jesus has come, in that moment, faith overcame fear. I love when that happens. Victory always comes for God's children, for his people, when faith overcomes fear. And Peter stepped over the side of that boat. And he started to walk. Now I'm thinking, now it's our turn. But if we are going to take that faith journey, we will have to learn to trust like little children. Many years ago, I pastored south of here, down in Tacoma. My children were little back then. I was young. I was an athlete still. I mean, just thinking about it feels good almost. The wonderful times. My little girl, she was 2 years old, and we could afford a pool. That's because it was Walmart, and you could have these little plastic pools with all the colorful stuff and the little toys they can have in them. But the Candlers ruined it for me one time because in their neighborhood, I'm thinking it's Furcrest, but in their little neighborhood, not far from us, there was a neighborhood public pool, and they invited us one evening, and after that, my little plastic pool was no good anymore. My girl was 2 years old. She didn't know how to swim, but there was a problem because she had no fear of water. And at that public pool, there was not one place in the pool that was not deeper than her. She liked it so much there, but I always had to be ready because she would do this thing that probably some of you remember when you were little. I'd be in the pool and suddenly I'd hear this, "Daddy, catch me!" And you better have fast reflexes. It's a good thing I played a lot of football, a lot of baseball, a lot of basketball, because she might not be alive today. Because not only was she fast and I didn't know where she's coming from, their moms always put all this like sunblock on them. And it's kind of like they're greased watermelons, only they're torpedo speed, Mach 2, year 2. And she'd yell, "Daddy, catch me!" And I'd throw my arms open and she would leap off the side of this big pool. And I would catch her. She could always trust me to catch her. My little Steffi loved the big pool. The Candlers got us into that. No more with the Walmart pool. She liked the big pool. If she had the choice between the little plastic pool or the public pool, the big pool, the deep pool, she wanted that one. I'm wondering, why do so many Christians and congregations, well, I'm wondering, why so many of us have chosen to sit in little plastic pools, content to play with little earthly toys, when our Father is in the big pool, when our Father is in the public pool, when our Father's in the deep. I think it's because little plastic pools don't take any faith. And we've grown accustomed to liking to play with our little earthly toys. And I mean, it doesn't take any faith, and we can do this on our own, we think. And I think it's because to the outward appearance, congregations seem to be safe in the little plastic pool. But that is only part of the lie that would lullaby us to sleep and drown us spiritually in 6 inches of water. There's a lot that I don't know, but I do know this. God has called us to the big pool, to the public pool. Our Father has called us to the deep. So what kind of a church do I want? Well, that's easy. I long for a church. I dream of a church that tires of the little plastic pool in a rubber ducky religion. So I'm not asking for much. All I want is a church that walks on water. But that's going to take faith. Lord Jesus, give us faith. Change us, transform us in a world of storm and chaos and pain. Make us different. Help us to reflect light. Help us to have faith. Take us on a walk we could never go on without walking with you, Lord. Impact this world with your love, with your salvation, Lord. And I pray you will do it through us. And I ask this in Jesus, our Savior's name. Amen.